I found this large object in my late grandfather's home. The center dial says pinnacle inclinometer, but I don't think that refers to the whole piece. My grandfather served in the United States Coast Guard and had many nautical items, so I wonder if this is something maritime related. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a ship's binnacle, the traditional stand that houses and protects a ship's magnetic compass. The brass dome at the top contains the compass itself, mounted on gimbals so it stays level even as the ship rolls. The large iron spheres on either side, often painted red and green, are known as Kelvin's balls. They are part of the correction system designed to counteract the ship's own magnetism, so the compass points true. Binnacles like this were once a centerpiece of every vessel's navigation, placed near the helm so the helmsman could steer by the compass day or night. This style of binnacle was widely used from the mid-19th century through much of the 20th century. I saw these wooden poles on a truck in Washington state. Each one has a metal star embedded in the end. They look too smooth to be raw logs, maybe telephone or power poles. What are those metal stars for? What you're looking at are star locks, metal star-shaped inserts embedded in the ends of wooden utility poles. Their purpose is to keep the pole from splitting as the wood dries and weathers. When hammered into the top of the pole, the star lock acts like an internal clamp. It holds the growth rings tightly together and prevents long cracks, called checks, from spreading through the wood. This small invention was created in the 1980s by Brian Bain in Washington state and quickly became a standard feature in the utility industry. By reducing splitting, star locks help poles stay stronger for decades, ensuring that heavy equipment like crossarms, transformers, and cables mounted on top remain securely in place. I found this heavy bronze object in my garage. It's about 2 feet 8 inches tall, looks kind of like a bomb or rocket, but the police confirmed it isn't ordnance. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a Wallace and Tiernan bathythermograph, a torpedo-shaped oceanographic instrument designed to measure and record water temperature with depth. It was lowered into the sea from a ship, where it used a pressure sensor and a temperature sensor to scratch a continuous graph onto a soot-coated glass slide, showing how temperature changed as it went down. Invented in the late 1930s by Athelstan Spielhaus and adopted by the United States Navy during World War II, the bathythermograph became an important tool in anti-submarine warfare. Submarines and surface ships used it to detect the thermocline, a layer of rapid temperature change that bends sonar signals and could conceal submarines. After the war, it remained a standard instrument for oceanographers, fisheries scientists, and navies around the world. I found this strange device in my late grandfather's garage. It has a wooden base with a large rotating drum and some brass fittings. He worked as an engineer and inventor in Leeds. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a Ruhmkorff induction coil, also known as a spark coil. Invented in the mid-19th century, it takes low-voltage current from a battery and transforms it into very high-voltage pulses, powerful enough to produce long, crackling sparks across an air gap. Coils like this were once a staple in laboratories, classrooms, and even public lectures, where they amazed audiences by producing lightning on demand. They were also used to power early X-ray tubes, wireless telegraphy, and even the ignition systems of early automobiles. These coils were widely used from the mid-19th century into the early 20th century, before being replaced by more modern and compact high-voltage devices. I found this brass object marked France. It opens like a scissor at both ends, but I have no other information about it. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a vintage watchmaker's truing caliper, sometimes called a balance truing caliper. It was used to hold the tiny pivots of a watch's balance wheel, letting the wheel spin freely. With a small pointer set close to the rim, a watchmaker could see if the wheel ran flat and round, and if not, carefully adjust it. These calipers were a standard tool for watchmakers from the late 19th to the mid-20th century, especially in France and Switzerland. My dad recently inherited a bunch of old tools, and we have no idea what this one is used for. It has a wooden handle, 2 sharp-angled blades, and an adjustable bolt on the side. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a 2-cutter plow plane, a rare mid-20th century woodworking tool designed for cutting grooves in wood. Unlike traditional plow planes that use a single cutter, this version features two opposing blades, allowing it to cut on both the push and pull strokes. This particular type was first introduced in 1958 in Britain under the name Technicos, later rebranded as the Tech Tool. Its innovative design gained attention for its versatility. It could cut grooves along straight or curved paths into concave or convex surfaces and even stop precisely at a defined depth. Though it never became a standard tool in most workshops, it found a niche among woodworkers tackling complex joinery tasks. My friend and I found these silicone-looking panels with round balls at a Goodwill store. They have the IKEA logo on the back, but we couldn't find them on IKEA's website. Does anyone know what they're used for? What you found is part of an IKEA toy storage system called Makalos. The idea was simple. It was to turn cleaning up toys into a little game that encouraged children to tidy up. This system could be mounted on a wall, under a table, or even on the side of furniture, turning unused surfaces into playful storage. It was introduced in the early 2000s as one of IKEA's more experimental designs. The soft, flexible construction was also a safety feature, so kids could interact with it without risk. I found this strange tool while going through my grandfather's things. It's marked Goodell Company, Antrim, New Hampshire. Does anyone know what it is? This object is an antique double cherry pitter, also known in its time as a cherry stoner. It was made in the late 19th to early 20th century and designed to remove pits from two cherries at once. The cast iron tool clamps onto a table, and with each push of the lever, twin plungers press through the cherries and eject the pits, leaving the fruit mostly intact. Cherry pitters like this were popular household gadgets during the wave of kitchen inventions in the late 1800s. They saved time for families who canned cherries for pies, preserves, or wine, especially in regions with large cherry harvests. A friend sent me this picture, and I'm not sure what this device is. The glass tube inside contains several bulbs and appears to have liquid mercury in it. The bulb is removable, there are cooling fins, and the interior is parabolic and chrome-plated. At first glance, it looks like a light bulb, but maybe it isn't. Does anyone know what it is? This device is a mid-20th century mercury quartz ultraviolet lamp sold under the brand name Hair. Often called a sun lamp or health lamp, it produces ultraviolet light using a high-pressure mercury vapor arc inside a quartz glass tube. The quartz allows ultraviolet rays to pass through unlike ordinary glass. Lamps like this were marketed in the 1940s and 1950s as home wellness devices, essentially artificial sunlight meant to boost vitamin D, improve mood, and even treat ailments ranging from skin conditions to colds. When switched on, the lamp emitted a bright bluish-white glow rich in ultraviolet radiation. People would sit in front of it wearing protective goggles, believing a few minutes a day would bring health benefits. In reality, while the ultraviolet exposure could stimulate vitamin D production, the lamps were overhyped and often unsafe. Prolonged use risked painful burns, eye damage, and long-term health issues. By the late 1940s, United States regulators began cracking down on exaggerated claims, and by the 1950s, these devices largely disappeared from the market. I found this strange wooden device at a secondhand store. The front section spins like a wheel, and the whole thing looks handmade. What was it used for? What you found is a 19th century yarn winding wheel, commonly known as a yarn swift. These devices were used by knitters and spinners to hold a loop of yarn called a skein while it was wound into a ball. By keeping the yarn taut and tangle-free, the swift allowed one person to do the work that previously required two. The spokes spin freely, allowing the yarn to unwind smoothly as it's pulled. This particular style, with multiple radial arms mounted on a rotating shaft, was especially popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries. In the United States, yarn swifts like this were commonly found in homes across the country and were often handmade or crafted by small furniture makers. One notable version was patented in 1897 by John Elder of Vermont. His design featured spring-tensioned, collapsible arms and a built-in friction brake. I found this unusual tool in my grandfather's shed. The handle is made of cast iron, but I have no idea what it was used for. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is an antique Crandall hammer, a masonry tool used by stonemasons in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It has a cast iron handle and a head made of multiple steel spikes clamped together. When swung against stone, those spikes chip away the surface and leave a rough, textured finish. Masons used crandall hammers, mainly on softer stones like limestone and sandstone, to even out the surface, or give it a stippled look. The finish produced by this tool, called crandalled stone, can still be seen on historic buildings today. I found 2 of these objects on the ground many years ago. The back is stamped with the word signal and the number 2 followed by a degree symbol. Does anyone know what this is? This object is a vintage glass reflector, often called a cat's eye or reflector button. It was once used on road signs and markers to make them visible at night. The marking indicates a narrow 2-degree spread, designed for long-distance visibility on highways. These reflectors were widely used from the 1920s through the 1950s on stop signs, warning signs, railroad crossings, and guardrails. My dad bought this at an estate sale years ago, but we still don't know what it is. It has 2 ports on the top he thinks are for oil, and on the rear there's a shaft. He has fed a paperclip through as a handle. You turn the paperclip, and the whole mechanism spins. There's a raised nub on the wheel that fits into the left part, spinning it at what he guesses is a timed interval. The only marking says Gemco. What your dad bought is an intermittent motion gear mechanism made by Gemco, a company known for building heavy machine tools in the mid-20th century. It's a type of indexing device that converts continuous or oscillating input into step-by-step rotary motion. Each time the mechanism is driven, a pawl engages the ratchet wheel and turns it forward 1 notch, then a latch holds it firmly in place until the next step. Mechanisms like this were widely used on industrial machines such as metal shapers, where the workpiece or table needed to move a set distance after each cutting stroke. The same principle was also applied in devices like projectors and printing presses. What is the purpose of these windowless floors in this skyscraper? They don't have any windows, only some large cylindrical structures inside, and I've noticed there are several of them throughout the building. These are mechanical or void floors, levels in the skyscraper that don't contain apartments or offices, but instead house the building's equipment. In ultra-tall residential towers like 432 Park Avenue, these floors also serve a structural purpose, allowing wind to pass through the building and helping stabilize the tower. But in New York City, they've also been used as a workaround to zoning rules. The city doesn't limit the absolute height of a building. Instead, it restricts the total amount of residential floor area a developer can build on a given lot. Mechanical space didn't count toward that limit, so by inserting extra tall mechanical or empty floors, developers could push the apartments above much higher into the sky without exceeding their allowed square footage. The higher the apartment, the better the views, and the more valuable it becomes to wealthy buyers. I found this unusual road sign in Florida. At first glance, it looks like a person running or throwing something, but I couldn't figure out what it really means. Does anyone know what this sign is supposed to indicate? This sign is a Jai Alai directional sign, an official road guide sign in Florida that points the way to a Jai Alai fronton, the arena where the sport is played. The pictogram shows a player in mid-throw holding the curved basket glove called a cesta. Jai Alai is a high-speed ball game of Basque origin that was introduced to the United States in the early 20th century and became especially popular in Florida from the 1920s through the 1980s. At its peak, frontons drew thousands of spectators for both the fast-paced matches and the betting associated with them, making Jai Alai one of the state's major cultural and entertainment attractions. My friend picked up this red ball at an antique shop. Does anyone know what it is? This is the ball from a Logitech TrackMan Marble, a trackball mouse that became popular in the 1990s. Unlike a regular mouse that you move around on a desk, a trackball stays in one place while you roll the ball to control the cursor. The TrackMan Marble was introduced in 1995 and marketed as a precise, ergonomic alternative to the mouse. It never replaced the mouse in popularity, but it developed a loyal following. We're staying in an Airbnb, and I've noticed these strange little objects glued in different places around the house. They look kind of like batteries. Does anyone know what they are? What you found is a wall-mounted guard tour checkpoint, part of an electronic system used to verify security or cleaning rounds. These small metal buttons contain a unique ID code. A security guard or cleaner carries a handheld reader, touches it to the button, and the system records the checkpoint's ID along with the time. In simple terms, it's a modern replacement for the old watchman's clock, designed to prove that someone physically visited a location during their shift. These checkpoints are commonly found in office buildings, hotels, factories, prisons, and even in rental properties like Airbnbs to confirm that cleaning crews actually serviced every room. I found this small metal item while cleaning the kitchen. When I press the top, a little spike comes out of the hole. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an egg piercer, a small kitchen gadget designed to poke a tiny hole in an eggshell before boiling. Pressing an egg down onto the device makes a hidden pin pop out and puncture the shell. The idea is to vent the air pocket inside the egg so pressure doesn't build up and crack the shell while it cooks. I saw this strange double gramophone-looking device at an Andrew Bird concert. Does anyone know what it is and what it's used for? What you saw at the Andrew Bird concert is called the Janus spinning horn, two-headed rotating speaker system that looks like a pair of old gramophone horns fused together. Designed by sculptor and audio engineer Ian Schneller, it projects sound through twin papier-mâché horns, mounted on a motorized base. As the horns slowly spin, they create a swirling Doppler-like effect, giving the music a tremolo or vibrato quality. Andrew Bird runs his violin, whistle, and vocal loops through the Janus horn during performances. I got this small canvas pouch from my grandfather, and the back is stamped 1942. It's about 2 inches tall and 6 inches across. I know it's too small to be an ammo pouch, but I'm not sure what else it could be. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a World War II Carlisle bandage pouch, a small khaki canvas case issued to every American soldier. It was designed to carry the Carlisle model first aid packet, a compact wound dressing kit that included a sterile bandage and a dose of sulfa powder, one of the first antibiotics used to fight infection. These pouches were part of every soldier's standard gear, from infantrymen to paratroopers, and were carried on the belt for quick access. I found this old blade that looks like a sword or bayonet. It has a crown with the letters VR. It's about 28 inches long and seems like it could be fixed to a rifle. My great-grandfather, who was Canadian, may have brought it back from World War I. What you found is a British Enfield pattern 1856 sword bayonet, complete with its leather scabbard. It was made to mount on the .577 caliber Enfield short rifle, which was introduced in the mid-1850s. These bayonets saw service with the British Army during the Indian Rebellion of 1857 and in later colonial campaigns. They also crossed the Atlantic in large numbers during the American Civil War, when both Union and Confederate forces imported British Enfield rifles with their matching sword bayonets. Many of these blades, including examples like yours, continued to be used on later rifles such as the Snyder Enfield, which kept them in service well into the late 19th century. I found this knife among my grandfather's belongings. My grandfather lived in Sardinia in southern Italy and worked as both an architect and a farmer. What you found is a betel nut cutter, a traditional handheld tool used to slice the hard areca nut, commonly called betel nut. The nut is too tough to break by hand, so this hinged blade was designed to chop it into small pieces that could be wrapped in a betel leaf and chewed as a mild stimulant. However, chewing betel quids and areca nut is strongly linked to various forms of cancer and cardiovascular disease. We found these 2 small metal objects in a home office. They have a rounded sealed end and a side hole filled with some kind of cloth or mesh. There are no markings to identify them. Any idea what they were used for? What you found are metal kazoos, small musical instruments designed to modify the player's voice by using a vibrating membrane. The small opening on the side houses the membrane, which is usually made from wax paper or similar material. When you hum into the instrument, the air causes the membrane to vibrate, creating a buzzing sound similar to a trumpet. The slight dome shape around the side hole helps amplify the sound. These kazoos appear to be vintage models, likely made of tin or aluminum, and could date back to the mid-20th century. Kazoos have been used in jug bands, novelty acts, and even by major musicians for comic or unique sound effects. I found this sword-shaped object that plugs into a wall outlet. At first, I thought it might be for ironing clothes, but it feels too light and has a very unusual shape for that. Does anyone know what this is used for? What you found is a vintage electric tie iron, specifically the Almek Habo slipstrick yarn, manufactured in mid-20th century Sweden. It was designed for one very specific purpose, to remove wrinkles from neckties. This device plugs into a standard outlet and operates at 110 volts with a power rating of 55 watts. Its slim design allowed for precise pressing, helping keep ties looking crisp. I found this old wooden and iron machine in my school's attic, probably dating back to the early 1900s, when the building also served as a convent. It's about 3 feet tall and has a large spinning barrel, along with what looks like metal spikes and a flat table-like section at one end. The school opened in 1890 and was run by nuns for a time. Has anyone seen something like this before? What you've found is a vintage hair picker, a specialized machine used in the early 20th century for processing horsehair in mattresses, cushions, and upholstery. These machines were especially common in upholstery shops and may have been used in institutions like convents or boarding schools, where bedding and furniture were maintained on site. The device works by feeding clumps of horsehair into the machine, where a large spiked drum fluffs and separates the fibers. This process removed dirt and debris and restored volume and softness to the hair. It was common for higher-end homes and institutions to have their mattresses taken apart every few years for the horsehair to be cleaned, fluffed, and reused. I found this World War II photo showing American soldiers preparing to land, and several of them are carrying large cylindrical containers on their chests. What were these tubes used for? What you're looking at is a 60 millimeters mortar round carrying tube used by United States infantry during World War II. These containers were typically made from fiberboard and coated with moisture-resistant materials like asphalt-impregnated paper. In the image, the tubes are slung across the chests of soldiers from the 90th Infantry Division aboard LCI 326 on their way to Utah Beach during the D-Day landings on June 6, 1944. During combat operations, especially in airborne or infantry units, it was common practice to distribute mortar rounds among multiple soldiers in a squad. This helped lighten the load for dedicated mortar crews and ensured that additional ammunition would be available once a mortar position was established. Every extra round could make a critical difference, so carrying them was a shared responsibility across the unit. In rare and desperate situations, soldiers would even throw 60 millimeters mortar rounds like hand grenades. This was extremely dangerous and used only as a last resort. To do this, a soldier would remove the safety pin and strike the tail of the round against a hard surface to simulate the force of being fired from a mortar. After that, the round would detonate upon impact with the ground or any solid object. I found these old tools in a barn. They have long wooden handles and heavy rusted blades with slightly curved tips. Any idea what they are used for? You found vintage ditch bank blades, also known as brush hooks or sling blades. These tools were commonly used to clear thick underbrush, briars, and weeds. Popular from the early to mid-20th century, they were a staple on farms, in forestry work, and in wildfire control before chainsaws became standard. The blades are typically made of high-carbon steel and measure around 12 to 16 inches in length. They are mounted to wooden handles, typically 36 to 48 inches in length. They are swung like an axe, but with a slicing motion, to efficiently cut through dense vegetation. The curved blade design pulls brush away as it cuts. Your tools appear to be Kelly Perfect or Jim Dandy models, which were manufactured by companies like True Temper that were well known for their agricultural tools. I came across this brass tool while going through my great-granddad's old hand tools, likely from the 19th century. It has a wooden handle and a curved metal head with a flat blade. Any idea what this tool was used for? What you found is a Sturgis adjustable finishing jointer, a specialized concrete tool used in the early 20th century for creating smooth, clean joints in wet cement. It was designed to help shape and finish concrete surfaces, especially around edges or seams where a precise line was needed. This particular tool was part of a secondary product line sold by Baker Hamilton and Pacific Company of San Francisco, a major hardware wholesaler formed in 1918. While their premium tools were marketed under the Stiletto brand, Sturgis tools were positioned as more economical options, though their build quality remained strong. The bronze base made this tool more resistant to corrosion and wear compared to standard steel versions. Tools stamped with Sturgis are considered quite rare today. I got this small fragrant cube as a gift from Morocco and initially thought it was soap, but it doesn't dissolve or get any softer in water. It just gives off a strong perfume-like scent. Any idea what this is? What you've found is a traditional Moroccan solid perfume block, often referred to as an amber cube or musk cube. These handcrafted blocks are made from a blend of natural waxes, resins, essential oils, and aromatic botanicals like rose, jasmine, and sandalwood. They are designed to release fragrance slowly over time and are commonly used to scent clothing, linens, and personal spaces. Unlike soap, these perfume blocks do not dissolve in water. Instead, they can be gently rubbed onto the skin, hair, or beard, or placed in drawers, closets, or suitcases to impart a lasting aroma. Some people also crumble a small piece into a sachet to freshen up wardrobes or cars. The scent can last for months, and if it begins to fade, lightly scraping the surface can help revive the fragrance. I'm staying in a hotel in Amsterdam, and our suite is in the attic of a converted townhouse. We found this large wooden wheel with handmade iron V-hooks mounted near the ceiling. It spins freely. Any idea what it was originally used for? What you've discovered is a hoisting wheel, part of a manual lifting mechanism used in Amsterdam's canal houses. These wheels were integral to the Heidsbalk system, a beam with a pulley extending from the top of the building, allowing residents to hoist goods and furniture directly into upper floors. In the 17th century, Amsterdam experienced rapid growth, which led to the construction of narrow, multi-story houses with steep staircases. Because of the cramped interiors, transporting large items such as furniture inside became nearly impossible. To solve this, houses were built with a slight forward tilt and fitted with hoisting beams at the top. This allowed goods to be lifted straight into upper floors from the outside, bypassing the narrow stairwells entirely. I found this all-metal device in an attic. It weighs about 2 or 3 pounds and has a handle that turns freely. Looking at the bottom, there's a visible core with copper wire wound around it, and there are wire terminals on the back. It doesn't seem magnetic, but it feels like it should be. Any idea what it was used for? What you found is most likely a telephone magneto, a hand-cranked generator used in early telephone systems to produce alternating current. These devices were common from the late 19th century into the mid-20th century, especially in rural areas where modern infrastructure was limited. When the handle is turned, the internal armature rotates between permanent magnets, generating a current of around 50 to 100 volts. This current was used to ring the bell on another phone along the line or to alert an operator at a switchboard. The terminals on the back were for connecting to the telephone circuit, and the copper windings you noticed are part of the internal coil system that generates the current. Magnetos like this were sometimes repurposed for unusual uses, one example being telephoning for catfish, where the current was introduced into the water to temporarily stun the fish. I talked about that practice in one of my earlier videos. I'll leave a link in the description if you're curious. I found this unusual structure by the side of a canal in the United Kingdom. One side looks almost like the open pages of a book. Does anyone know what kind of structure this is? What you found is Unlock, a sculpture by British artist Thompson Dagnall, located along the Leeds and Liverpool Canal near Pennington Flash in Lee. The piece is made from 5 repurposed canal lock gates arranged to resemble the open pages of a book. Dagnall created Unlock to reflect the deep history and stories of the canal system. The open book shape symbolizes the lives, work, and journeys of the people who depended on these waterways. The Leeds and Liverpool Canal, where the sculpture stands, is historically significant. Construction began in 1770 and took 46 years to complete, finishing in 1816. It played a crucial role in the Industrial Revolution by carrying coal, limestone, and wool across northern England. The canal was dug by hand by laborers known as navvies, who used little more than shovels, picks, and wheelbarrows. These workers endured long hours and difficult conditions for very little pay. I found this clear, solid object, and I'm not sure what it's for. One side is rounded, the other is flat, and there's a tab at one end with gold stripes and a BGL logo. It seems to be made of acrylic or a similar material. Any idea what this is? What you found is a vintage Bausch & Lomb magnibar, an optical tool designed to help with reading and map work. These magnifiers were widely used in the mid-20th century by professionals such as cartographers, engineers, and librarians. Bausch & Lomb, founded in 1853 in Rochester, New York, became known for producing high-quality optical instruments. The company still exists today and manufactures a wide range of products, from contact lenses to eye care products for animals. I found this solid wood object that stands about 3 feet tall and weighs maybe 5 to 10 pounds. The top has a fixed handle, and below it there's a swinging arm hanging down. It doesn't seem to serve any obvious mechanical purpose. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a vintage wooden boot jack, a tool designed to help remove boots without needing to bend over or use your hands. These devices were especially useful for taking off tall or snug-fitting boots, such as riding boots or work boots, after a long day. The design is simple but effective. You place the heel of your boot in the U-shaped notch at the base, then step on the flat platform with your other foot to keep it stable. By pulling your foot upward, the jack holds the boot in place and allows it to slide off with minimal effort. Your particular model includes an extra swinging arm, which was most likely intended as an auxiliary support for removing low-top shoes. What is this atmospheric phenomenon? This photo was taken in Dalarna, Sweden on a cold winter day. This is a natural atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog or parhelion. This optical event occurs when sunlight is refracted through millions of tiny hexagonal ice crystals suspended high in the atmosphere, often within cirrus or cirrostratus clouds. Sundogs typically appear as bright spots flanking the sun at a distance of about 22 degrees, and they are usually seen when the sun is low on the horizon during very cold conditions. The effect is enhanced when the ice crystals are aligned horizontally, allowing them to act like miniature prisms. Light bends as it passes through them, producing the glowing mock suns on either side of the real one. In the image, you can also see a full halo connecting the sundogs, along with a sun pillar rising vertically and the parhelic circle stretching horizontally, all of which are part of the broader family of ice halo phenomena. Sundogs have been observed and recorded for centuries. Aristotle wrote about them in ancient Greece, and they've appeared in historical events such as the Battle of Mortimer's Cross in 1461, where a halo display was interpreted as an omen. I bought a lamp at a second-hand store, and the bulb it came with has a strange black shell around the core. It barely gives off any light. Does anyone know what kind of bulb this is? This is a flickering flame effect neon bulb, a type of novelty lighting designed to imitate the warm, unsteady glow of a candle or open flame. These bulbs contain a small amount of neon or helium gas, and when voltage is applied, the gas ionizes and produces a glowing discharge between two closely spaced electrodes. The flickering effect comes from the way the glow dances across the cathode surface. Inside the bulb, the electrodes are coated with a special compound, often based on barium and barium nitride, which makes the surface more uniformly reactive to electron flow. This uniformity paradoxically causes the discharge to become unstable, making the glow spot move unpredictably and giving it that natural flickering appearance. Variations in gas pressure, temperature, and electrode spacing further enhance this effect. These bulbs were especially popular in the mid to late 20th century and were commonly used in decorative lamps, night lights, and holiday displays. Though they emit very little light, they are prized for their atmospheric effect rather than brightness. I found these objects in a box in the attic. Each one weighs about 1.5 pounds and measures approximately 8.5 inches in length. They appear to be made from different materials, and I'm not sure if they are of Indian or Japanese origin. Does anyone know what they were used for? What you found are furbas, traditional ritual tools used in Tibetan Buddhism and Bon practices. A furba is typically three-sided and made from materials like brass, iron, or bone. Each face of the blade represents a different aspect of purification, cutting through ignorance, desire, and hatred. The top of the furba often features the face of a deity, and the handle is usually shaped like a vajra or another symbolic form representing spiritual power. These ritual objects are deeply rooted in Himalayan spiritual traditions and are especially associated with the deity Vajrakilaya, who embodies the removal of spiritual obstacles. During rituals, the furba may be used to pin down symbolic demons, to stabilize energies in sacred spaces, or even placed into the ground to establish spiritual boundaries. What is this tube that this Coast Guard officer inserts his handgun into while loading it before boarding a boat? This is a bullet containment tube, also known as a clearing barrel or clearing station. It's used by military and law enforcement personnel to safely load or unload a firearm, especially before entering a secure area or boarding a vessel. The tube is designed to catch and contain an accidental discharge in case the firearm goes off during the loading or unloading process. It's made from reinforced steel or ballistic rubber and is often filled with sand or a special bullet trapping material to absorb the projectile safely. I found this shiny metal tool while cleaning out a drawer. It's marked with the Hermes logo and has an unusual hooked shape with a flattened tip. I thought it might have something to do with ties, but I'm really not sure. Does anyone know what this is used for? What you found is a hoof pick, a tool used to clean a horse's hooves. The curved end is designed to remove dirt, mud, stones, and debris that can get packed into the hoof. Hoof picks date back as far as the Roman cavalry and eventually became standard equipment for anyone who rode or worked with horses. By the 19th century, they were commonly issued to soldiers and often built into grooming kits or folding knives. Today's versions might have ergonomic grips, stainless steel hooks, or brightly colored handles, but the basic design has stayed almost the same for centuries. I found this wooden rack filled with blocks sorted by length and width. The only marking is a warning about wood shrinkage. The pieces look like some kind of gauge blocks, but I'm not sure what they were used for. What is the set? What you found is a letterpress furniture cabinet, a specialized organizer used in traditional printing shops to store wooden blocks known as furniture. These blocks were an essential part of the letterpress process, popular from the 15th century all the way through the 20th. Though they never touched ink, they played a crucial role in every printed page. Each block was cut to a standard size measured in picas, an old printer's unit of length roughly equal to 1/6 of an inch. Furniture blocks were used to fill the empty spaces around metal or wooden type within the printer's frame. Unlike the type itself, these blocks sat slightly lower, ensuring they wouldn't receive ink during printing. Paired with narrow spacers called reglets and secured by locking wedges known as quoins, this furniture held the entire layout firmly in place. I found this dagger in my grandma's house. It has a curved blade, a silver-colored metal sheath with detailed engravings, and a handle that features a small red gemstone or glass inlay. Does anyone know what kind of dagger this is? What you found is a khanjar, a traditional curved dagger originating from Oman. These ceremonial weapons were especially popular from the 18th through the 20th century and are still worn today during formal occasions throughout the Arabian Peninsula. This type of dagger is typically made from steel, while the hilt and sheath are crafted from materials such as silver, brass, ivory, or in older examples, even rhinoceros horn. The blade has a distinctive J shape. Historically, the khanjar served as both a practical weapon and a symbol of status, worn at the waist during everyday life and ceremonial events. Today, it is still worn during weddings, parades, and official functions, and it appears on the country's currency and coat of arms as one of Oman's most enduring cultural icons. I found this in the garage of my parents. It's a small metal tool with two rods crossing in the middle. Does anyone know what it is? This is a mechanical knife sharpener. It consists of a metal frame that holds two sharpening rods crossed at a fixed angle, usually made of tungsten carbide or ceramic. To use it, you just pull the knife blade through the center, and both sides of the edge get sharpened at the same time. Sharpeners like this became popular in the mid-20th century because they were simple, reliable, and easy to use, and this same basic design is still in use today. Unlike whetstones or electric sharpeners, they require no special skill and work for a wide variety of knives. I found a metal tube about 4 inches long, with what seems to be a plastic eyepiece at one end. What is this item? This object is a vintage selenium photographic exposure meter, widely used from the 1930s through the 1960s and commonly known as a light meter. These devices were essential tools for photographers before the advent of built-in camera metering systems. They measure the intensity of light in a scene to determine the optimal exposure settings. The eyepiece is used to aim the meter toward the subject or light source. Inside, a light-sensitive selenium cell detects the light level. Selenium cells are photovoltaic, meaning they generate a small electrical current when exposed to light. This current moves a needle on a scale, indicating how much light is present. However, selenium cells degrade over time, especially when exposed to light continuously. To extend their lifespan, it was common practice to keep the meter covered or stored in a case when not in use. I found this strange-looking item in a Mexican restaurant filled with old things. Does anyone know what it is? This item is a carbide lamp, a type of portable lighting device that was widely used in the early 20th century, especially by miners and cavers. It operates by combining calcium carbide with water to produce acetylene gas, which is then ignited to create a bright flame. Carbide lamps were introduced in the early 1900s and became popular due to their bright, steady light and relatively low operating cost. They were commonly used in mining operations, as well as for caving and camping. The lamp consists of two chambers. The upper chamber holds water, and the lower chamber contains calcium carbide. When water drips onto the carbide, it produces acetylene gas, which is then ignited at the burner to produce light. My great-grandma went on safari in Africa in the 80s and brought this back, which I recently inherited. Unfortunately, she's no longer around to give any other details on it. It's roughly a foot tall and feels like a mix between wood and metal. My mom said it came from a cannibal tribe. What is this thing? This object is a tokoloshi figurine, a representation of a mythical creature from southern African folklore. The tokoloshi was described as a small, mischievous, and malevolent spirit that could become invisible by drinking water or swallowing a stone. It was believed to be summoned by malevolent individuals to cause trouble, illness, or even death. In traditional beliefs, the tokoloshi was associated with witchcraft and was often blamed for unexplained misfortunes. To protect themselves, people would raise their beds off the ground, as the tokoloshi was thought to be unable to climb. If someone wanted to drive the tokoloshi out of the home, they would turn to spiritual leaders or traditional healers, known as sangomas, who would perform a ritual of banishment. Found this in a friend's kitchen. It's a metal tool with a long handle, a sliding ball on top, and a cup-shaped end. The ball can slide up and down. We have no idea what it's for. Does anyone know what this is? What you've found is a German egg topper, a kitchen tool designed to neatly remove the top of a soft or hard-boiled egg. Its full name in German is
Eierschalensollbruchstellenverursacher,
which roughly translates to eggshell predetermined breaking point creator. To use it, you place the cup-shaped end over the top of the egg, lift the sliding ball up the handle, then release it. The ball drops and creates a vibration that cracks the shell in a clean circle. You can then simply lift off the top of the egg. When I was at a bar in Amsterdam, the guy sitting across from me kept flicking this little thing, and it made a loud sound. It fit in the palm of his hand and looked like it was made of metal. What is this item? This item is a Jew's harp. It's a small, handheld musical instrument that produces sound through the vibration of a flexible metal tongue mounted on a frame. When the player flicks the tongue, it vibrates, and the mouth cavity acts as a resonator, amplifying the sound and allowing the pitch and tone to be shaped by the movement of the lips and breath. Despite the name, the Jew's harp has no connection to Jewish culture. The origin of the term is unclear, but many believe it's a linguistic distortion of jaw harp. The instrument is ancient, with origins dating back over 4,000 years to Asia. In the 18th century, the Jew's harp became fashionable in European courts. Its popularity continued into the 19th and early 20th centuries, with several designs receiving patents, such as an 1885 United States patent by John Mahel for an improved version of the mouth harp. I found this vintage knife with a wooden handle and a strange brass attachment that looks like some kind of clamp or guide. What do you think this knife was used for? This is a tool for removing thorns from roses. It allows you to quickly strip thorns and leaves from the stem without damaging the plant itself. The brass component plays a key role in that process. By clamping the stem between the two metal jaws, you can clean it with a single downward motion. After that, the built-in knife can be used to trim or refresh the cut. Tools like this began appearing in the late 19th century. By the 1880s, inventors were already filing early patents, and by the 1920s, more refined models emerged, including designs very similar to the one we're looking at here. They quickly became popular with florists around the world. This particular design was especially common in Europe during the mid-20th century, and to this day, nearly identical tools are still being manufactured in the Netherlands and Germany. I found this small metal object in an old, crumbling house. It's labeled Rally, and it has a textured roller that spins. The owner is like 92 and keeps all his stuff, so it may very well be incredibly old. What do you think this item is? This is a Rally Dry Shaver, a pocket-sized mechanical shaving device introduced in the early 1950s. Invented by Swedish engineer Jonas Malmberg and patented in 1953, the Rally was marketed as a no-lather, hand-powered razor that fit right in your vest pocket. The design featured a hollow slotted drum, which you'd roll across your face. As the drum turned, facial hair would catch in the narrow slots and be sheared off against a fixed internal blade, a bit like a miniature lawnmower for your stubble. The shaver folded into its own metal case, and early advertisements highlighted its surgical steel construction, ease of use, and compact form. You didn't need water, soap, or electricity, just roll and shave. But in practice, the Rally often failed to live up to expectations. Since only the hairs that entered its tiny slots were actually cut, many users found the shave patchy and uncomfortable. My grandmother received this mysterious metal object from a friend who passed away. It's small enough to hold in one hand, and both the pipe and the cylinder are hollow. We didn't try to open it because it seems quite old and fragile. What do you think this is? This item is an antique opium pipe, a device that was commonly used during the 18th and 19th centuries to vaporize and inhale opium. Unlike tobacco pipes, opium pipes were designed to gently heat small pellets of opium over the flame of a specialized lamp. The heat would cause the opium to vaporize rather than burn, and the resulting vapors were inhaled through a long, hollow stem. Smoking opium was a highly ritualized and social activity. In opium dens throughout Asia and in Chinatowns across the West, users would recline on couches and carefully balance these long pipes above small oil lamps. The entire process was slow and deliberate, requiring specialized tools, including scrapers, tiny spoons, and lacquered storage cases. I spotted this S-shaped metal piece on the front of an old house while out on a walk. I've seen similar ones on other buildings too. What do you think it is? This is an anchor plate, a structural element used to reinforce masonry walls from the outside. This S-shaped plate is actually the visible part of a tie rod system hidden inside the wall. A long iron rod runs through the building, connecting one wall to the opposite side or to a strong internal beam. The anchor plate at the end of that rod clamps onto the wall and, when tightened, helps pull the structure together, keeping the walls from bowing out or collapsing over time. S-shaped plates like this one became popular in the 19th century, especially in Europe and North America. Builders often gave these anchors decorative shapes, stars, crosses, or scrolling S-forms since they were visible on the facade. I found this strange metal tool while cleaning out an old workshop. It's about 8 inches long, with a small wheel on one end and a stopper in the middle. The overall shape kind of resembles a drawing compass. What do you think this tool was used for? This is a Chesterton gauge glass cutter designed for use with steam boiler sight tubes. This pliers-like tool was developed in the late 19th century to cleanly score and snap the thick-walled glass tubes used to monitor water levels inside steam boilers. It clamps around the tube, and with a squeeze and a twist, a small cutting wheel scores the glass evenly all the way around. The tube is then snapped at the score line, leaving a clean, usable edge. A brass stop on the tool lets the user cut each tube to the correct length. Some versions also include a spring lever that applies steady pressure to the scoring point. The first patent for a tool like this was issued in 1892 to Jonathan Fowler. Just a few months later, a second, more refined version was patented by Arthur Chesterton, founder of the Chesterton Company, established in 1884 in Boston. I found this heavy glass bulb filled with liquid while going through my grandfather's things after he passed away. Inside the bulb, there's a metal disc floating in the liquid. This object is a glass fire grenade, an early type of fire extinguisher used in homes during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These fragile, liquid-filled glass bulbs were designed to be either thrown directly into a fire or mounted high on the wall on special heat-sensitive brackets that would release the grenade automatically when the surrounding temperature rose. Inside was a fire-suppressant fluid, usually salt water or carbon tetrachloride. When the glass shattered, the liquid smothered the flames, working much like a primitive sprinkler. Fire grenades became especially popular in the 1870s and 1880s. Victorian households often kept them on the mantelpiece or in wall brackets near the kitchen or fireplace. The liquid inside early models was typically brine with ammonium chloride, but by the early 1900s, many grenades used carbon tetrachloride, a chemical that vaporized on contact with heat to suffocate flames. However, carbon tetrachloride is highly toxic. It can harm the nervous system and internal organs, and when exposed to high temperatures, it breaks down into phosgene gas, a deadly substance once used as a chemical weapon. For this reason, fire grenades were phased out and officially declared unsafe by the 1950s. While walking through a neighborhood in the Netherlands, I noticed a row of tall posts, about 13 feet high with nets attached to the top. They were only on one side of the street, and there were at least 15 of them lined up in a row. These tall posts with nets on top are part of a bat navigation system, designed to help bats orient themselves after the removal of roadside trees. Bats rely on linear landscape features, such as tree lines and hedgerows, to navigate at night using echolocation. When these natural guides are removed during construction or roadwork, bats can become disoriented and may fly dangerously low over roads. To address this, conservation laws require the installation of temporary mitigation structures. These screens, usually made of dark mesh or fabric and mounted on poles up to 13 feet tall, act as artificial landmarks that reflect the bats' echolocation signals. Monitoring studies have shown that bats follow these screens as intended, flying along them rather than veering off course. I found this unusual brass object while cleaning out my grandfather's old barn. It looks like some kind of foldable tool, and it's quite heavy for its size. Judging by its look and feel, it might be from the 1800s. This is a 19th century folding Pricket candlestick, a compact brass candle holder designed for travel. It features a collapsible central shaft and hinged legs that fold flat, allowing it to be packed neatly in a traveler's kit or military chest. When fully opened, the three arms unfold into a tripod base, and a central spike, known as a pricket, would hold a candle upright. This particular design is closely associated with Japanese inventor Tanaka Hisashige, who created a version around the 1830s. Known as a kaichu shokudai, or pocket candlestick, Tanaka's model became famous for its remarkably efficient folding mechanism, crafted entirely from flat brass components. Folding candlesticks were common in Asia and Europe, where travelers, merchants, and officers relied on portable lighting devices like this one. In England, a similar style called the Brighton bun was popular among officers and explorers. It consisted of two screw-together pans that opened into a portable candlestick. When we were at a restaurant, we saw this picture on our table. We spent a while trying to figure out what kind of machine it was, but none of us could agree. Does anyone know what this is? This item is an olive press, a traditional device used to extract oil from olives. These presses have been used for thousands of years, dating back to ancient Greece and Rome, and variations of the same basic mechanism are still used in some parts of the world today. A typical olive press included a large stone wheel or mill that crushed the olives into a paste. The paste was then placed into woven bags or baskets, which were stacked beneath a wooden or stone press. By turning a screw or using a lever mechanism, pressure was applied to the stack, forcing out the oil, while separating it from the solids and water. In ancient Mediterranean cultures, olive oil was more than just a food staple. It was also used in medicine, cosmetics, religious rituals, and even as fuel for lamps. I found this beautifully decorated cast iron object in an old bank where I work. It has a wooden handle, floral patterns, and what looks like a metal press at the base. The whole thing feels quite old and solid, maybe even Victorian. What do you think this was used for? This object is a Victorian-era desk embossing seal press made by the London-based firm Parkins and Gatto, a prominent supplier of fine office equipment in the late 19th century. The lever-operated embossing press evolved in the mid-19th century as an alternative to older screw-style presses. This particular model, known as Patent 3965, features a lever mechanism, a cast-iron frame, and gold floral decorations hand-painted onto a black enamel finish. It was used to press embossed seals into official documents. Embossing presses like this were standard fixtures in British and American offices throughout the second half of the 19th century. The seal would leave a raised imprint, often a crest or a company emblem, on paper, serving as proof of authenticity. This made the tool especially useful in legal offices, banks, and business correspondence. Seal presses are still used today, though mostly for ceremonial purposes. Antique models like this one are considered collectible for their craftsmanship and historical significance. Depending on condition and markings, they typically sell for between $100 and $300 on the antique market. I found this heavy brass object among my grandfather's belongings. It comes in a worn leather case and has "Made for Royal Navy" engraved on the lid along with a crown emblem. Does anyone know what it was used for? What you found is a pocket sextant, a compact navigational tool designed to determine your position by measuring the angle between a celestial object and the horizon. Despite its small size, it performs the same essential function as a full-sized marine sextant. These instruments were especially popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries, valued for their portability and precision. They were often carried by surveyors, military officers, and explorers who needed a reliable way to find their location on land or at sea. The device operates on the principle of double reflection. Inside the case, it houses two small mirrors, the index mirror and the horizon mirror, along with a vernier or micrometer scale for reading the measured angle. To use it, the observer would look through a small peephole or miniature telescope, align the reflected image of a celestial body with the horizon, and then take the angle reading from the scale. To determine their exact location, they also used a high-precision timepiece, typically a chronometer or a chronograph. By combining the measured angle with the precise time, navigators could calculate their latitude and longitude using special navigational tables. Though pocket sextants are more difficult to use than full-sized versions due to their tiny optics and narrow field of view, they were essential for navigation in the field. I came across a pile of about 15 of these curious metal objects at my friend's grandmother's house. Each one has a cylindrical drum attached to a handle with a rod that loosely slides in and out. What do you think these are? What you found is a Tibetan hand-held prayer wheel, known in Tibetan as a mani lakor. These have been used in Tibetan Buddhist practice for centuries as a way to accumulate merit and focus the mind during meditation. Each wheel contains a tightly rolled scroll inscribed with mantras. According to tradition, spinning the wheel clockwise, even once, is believed to be equivalent to verbally reciting all of the mantras stored inside. That's why prayer wheels have long been used by both monks and laypeople across Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, and surrounding regions. The small chain with a weight helps the cylinder spin smoothly when flicked, and the motion is meant to symbolically spread blessings and compassionate intentions outward to all beings. Handheld prayer wheels likely first appeared in Tibet between the 11th and 13th centuries. Over time, they evolved from simple wooden or copper designs into more elaborate objects, often decorated with silver, coral, turquoise, and embossed script. What is this small metal object with two round weights on arms? It's about 2 to 3 inches tall and was found in my in-laws' basement. They think it may have been something their grandfather used, who worked with machinery. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a flyball governor, a mechanical speed regulator once used in early spring-powered phonographs like the Victrola. This small metal device, typically just a few inches tall, contains pivoting arms with spinning weights. As the turntable motor runs, the shaft spins and the balls swing outward due to centrifugal force. When they move far enough, the governor engages a brake mechanism that slows the motor slightly, keeping the playback speed steady. Flyball governors were essential for playing records at a consistent pitch, especially before electric motors and electronic speed controls existed. The concept dates back to the late 1700s when it was first used in steam engines. By the late 19th century, it was adapted for phonographs. In 1898, inventors like Eldridge R. Johnson and Thomas Edison patented versions of these governors for use in gramophones, helping launch the early recording industry. These devices remained standard inside wind-up record players through the 1920s and beyond. I've seen this strange object sticking out of the water near a creek where I live. It looks like part of a vessel or some kind of old machinery, and it's been submerged like this for years. I have no idea what it is, and I don't even know where to start looking for information. What you found is a piece of Questor 1, a homemade submarine built in the 1960s by a Brooklyn shipyard worker named Jerry Bianco, who had an ambitious dream to raise the wreck of the luxury liner Andrea Doria from the bottom of the Atlantic. The Andrea Doria sank in July of 1956 after colliding with another ship off the coast of Nantucket. Bianco built the submarine almost entirely by hand on the banks of Coney Island Creek, using salvaged steel and funding the project by selling $1 shares in his company. Questor 1 measured about 45 feet in length and weighed over 80 tons. According to reports, Navy engineers rated it safe for depths up to 600 feet, more than enough to reach the Andrea Doria. Bianco's plan was to descend to the wreck and use inflatable lift bags to float it back to the surface. But things didn't go as planned. During a public launch event in 1970, the crane operator lowered the sub into the water too soon. With ballast removed from one side to reduce weight, the submarine immediately tipped over and became stuck in the mud. Bianco eventually managed to upright the submarine and even conducted a few test dives, but the failed launch scared off investors, and the mission never moved forward. I found this tool in an old pine chest I bought at a woodworking auction. It has what looks like an ivory handle, and the metal tip opens when you loosen the bolt, kind of like a pair of locking tweezers. There are no markings on it. Does anyone know what this tool was used for? What you found is a ruling pen, a precision drafting tool once used by engineers, cartographers, and illustrators to draw consistent ink lines by hand. The instrument works by adjusting the gap between two metal blades using the screw at the top. Ink is loaded into the slot between the blades, and when the pen is drawn across the paper, it produces a clean, uniform line. The width of the line can be controlled by tightening or loosening the screw. The example you found appears to date from the late 19th or early 20th century, judging by the aged steel tip and the handle, which is likely made of bone or possibly ivory. Today, antique ruling pens with bone or ivory handles are considered collectible items. Their market value depends on condition and maker, but typically ranges from around $50 to $100. I found this unusual tool at a thrift store in a box of old kitchenware. The store owner had no idea what it was. Is this some kind of specialized knife or tool? What you found is a shinai maintenance tool, a specialized instrument used in the practice of kendo, the Japanese art of swordsmanship. During intense training, the bamboo slats of a shinai can begin to fray or crack. This tool helps practitioners shave away those splinters, keeping the surface safe and preventing potential injuries. The curved notch in the blade fits the contour of the bamboo slats, allowing users to gently scrape away imperfections without damaging the wood. I found this heavy metal tool while cleaning out an old house. It has the name C.S. Osborne, United States, stamped on the side, along with the number 5/8. It looks like something you'd strike with a hammer, maybe to punch something. Does anyone know what this tool is? What you found is a 5/8-inch wad punch, also known as an arch punch, manufactured by C.S. Osborne and Company, a company that's been producing leather and industrial hand tools since the early 19th century. This tool was specifically designed to punch clean, perfectly round holes through thick materials like leather, rubber, fiber, and gasket stock. The working principle is remarkably simple. You place the punch upright on the material, then strike the flat top with a hammer or mallet. The sharp, circular edge at the base cuts out a round disc, called a wad, which is pushed up into the hollow barrel. Wad punches like this one have been used for generations across a variety of trades, from leatherworking and saddle making to plumbing, mechanical repair, and even shotgun reloading. In fact, the term wad punch comes from its historical use cutting felt or cardboard discs for muzzle-loading firearms. A coworker found this unusual knife among his late father's belongings. It has a highly decorative blade with intricate engravings, and the handle appears to be made of wood with metal and colored ring accents. The blade is about 6 inches long, with a total length of around 8 inches. Does anyone know what kind of knife this is? What you've found is a gunong, a traditional dagger from the southern Philippines, closely associated with the Muslim Moro tribes of Mindanao. It's a smaller cousin of the famous Chris sword and was historically carried for self-defense. In 1915, during the American occupation of the Philippines, civilians were banned from carrying long swords. In response, the Moro people began to carry larger and more elaborate versions of the gunong, small enough to remain legal, but still formidable in close combat. Over time, the dagger became more stylized, often featuring carved hardwood handles, metal ferrules, and intricately engraved blades like the one in your photo. I came across an unusual object made of wood, leather, and metal, featuring a large funnel-shaped base. At first glance, it resembles a tool like a bellows, possibly something used for a fireplace or a forge. This item is a bellows foghorn, a manually operated nautical signaling device, once used aboard ships to emit loud warning blasts in foggy conditions. It works by compressing air through a leather bellows and forcing it through a metal horn fitted with a vibrating reed, producing a deep, far-carrying sound. These devices were especially common during the 19th and early 20th centuries, before electric and compressed air horns became the norm. Sailors used them to alert other vessels of their presence when visibility was poor, helping to prevent collisions at sea. Early models looked like oversized fireplace bellows made of wooden boards and leather. The user would manually squeeze the handles to push air through a brass horn. Later, designs were fully enclosed in wooden boxes with the internal bellows operated by a side crank or lever. These more advanced versions made it easier to produce a steady, continuous tone. Models like the British Triton horn or the American-made Lothrop's patent fog horn became standard equipment on warships, fishing boats, and even lifeboats. I found this small metal container in an old junk drawer. It has a hinged lid, ornate engravings, and no markings anywhere. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a 19th century traveling inkwell, a small, portable ink container. These inkwells were designed for people who needed to write on the go. They became especially popular during the Victorian era, when letter writing was essential and long-distance travel became more common. The American Civil War further increased demand for leak-proof ink containers, as soldiers used them to write orders and send letters from the field. Many traveling inkwells featured spring-loaded lids, screw caps, or even rubber gaskets to prevent ink from leaking during rough travel. One of the earliest United States patents for a travel ink bottle dates to 1892, and companies like Waterman quickly adapted these ideas to support the growing fountain pen market. I found this unusual item while cleaning up my father's workshop. It's made of green plastic with 2 metal wheels at the bottom that have gear-like teeth. Any idea what it is? What you found is a frame wire crimper, a specialized tool used in beekeeping to tighten the thin wires that run across wooden honeycomb frames. When building or repairing a beehive frame, a beekeeper stretches wires across the frame to support the wax foundation, a thin sheet of beeswax imprinted with a honeycomb pattern that guides the bees as they build. Without support, this delicate wax sheet could sag, warp, or even collapse under the weight of bees and honey, especially in hot weather. Running this crimper along the wire puts a series of zigzag crimps into it, which shortens and tightens the wire instantly. The tension helps keep the foundation flat and strong, preventing it from sagging or breaking. I saw these rusty metal discs with vertical spikes on the roof of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. They're about the size of a hand, and there are many of them spread evenly across the dome. Does anyone know what they are? What you found are candle holders, metal plates with vertical spikes mounted across the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. These fixtures, often mistaken for bird deterrents, were actually used to hold thousands of candles and torches during major religious feast days. Each spike acted as a pricket, holding a candle or lantern upright against the surface of the dome. This system was part of a long-standing tradition of illuminating St. Peter's with real flames. On nights like the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul, Hundreds of workers, known as the Sanpietrini, would climb the roof and dome of the basilica, lighting more than 5,000 candles and lanterns one by one. As night fell, the basilica would gradually begin to glow, and at a signal, often the tolling of a bell, a second, more intense wave of torches would ignite all at once, turning the dome into a brilliant crown of fire. The last full candle-lit illumination took place in 1930. The tradition came to an end due to safety concerns, the increasing risk of fire, and the arrival of modern electric lighting. My buddy found this strange old wooden contraption at a swap meet. It has a long, tapered arm and a round wooden plate beneath it, all mounted on a wooden bench. Does anyone know what this is? What your friend picked up is a 19th century lever cheese press, a traditional tool once used on farms to compress cheese curds and remove whey. This type of press was a staple of rural dairy production long before factory-made cheese became common. It worked on a simple mechanical principle. A mold filled with curds was placed beneath a wooden pressing plate, and the long lever arm was pulled down or weighted to apply pressure. This forced out the excess moisture, helping the curds bond into a solid wheel of cheese and extending its shelf life. Similar designs were used for centuries across Europe and America, with regional variations. In the Netherlands, for example, ornately painted lever presses were often given as wedding gifts. In the United States, lever-style cheese presses were widely used throughout the 1800s, particularly in dairy-rich states like New York, Vermont, and Wisconsin. One of the earliest United States patents for a cheese press was issued in 1821. What is this vintage device with a grid of numbered buttons and a hand crank? We found it while deaccessioning items from our Historical Society's archive, but there's no date or maker plate on it. Does anyone know what it is or what it was used for? This is a Monroe mechanical calculator, most likely a Model L or a similar variant, produced sometime between the 1930s and 1950s. Before electronic calculators came along, these hand-cranked machines were essential tools in offices, laboratories, banks, and government agencies for performing basic arithmetic. The layout you see, with vertical columns of digit keys from 1 to 9 and a crank on the side, was designed to speed up data entry and reduce errors. After entering a number using the keys, the operator would turn the crank to carry out the calculation. All the results appeared on the mechanical dials at the top of the machine, and the device could even ring when certain thresholds were crossed. Monroe calculators were widely used in American businesses throughout the mid-20th century, and even played a role during World War II, assisting with logistics and ballistic calculations. I found this brass and steel object at an estate sale. It has a rotating gear numbered from 1 to 31, which spins when the pointed screw is turned. The handle has a heart-shaped loop, and the whole thing looks like it could be part of an old mechanical system. Does anyone know what this tool was used for? What you found is a handheld mechanical tachometer, a precision tool once used to measure the speed of rotating machinery in revolutions per minute without any electricity or batteries. To use it, a technician would press the pointed tip against a spinning shaft. As the shaft turned, the internal gear mechanism would rotate the number dial. Tools like this became essential in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly in machine shops, automotive garages, railroads, and aviation. They helped monitor everything from factory motors to aircraft engines. Some models were built by well-known companies like Starrett, Stewart Warner, and Jaeger, and many came with interchangeable tips or wheels for different types of contact measurements. Even in the age of lasers and digital sensors, mechanical tachometers are still valued today, especially in hazardous environments where electronics could pose a risk. I found this old heavy tool. It's about 15 inches long, made of wood and iron. One end has a bulbous metal weight and the other has a curved metal tip. Does anyone know what this tool was used for? What you found is a turpentine hack, a heavy handheld tool once widely used in the American South to collect pine resin for turpentine production. This tool was designed to score V-shaped cuts into the bark of longleaf pines. Each cut released the tree's natural resin, which would then drip into a small cup or box, nailed to the trunk. The curved iron blade on one end of the tool allowed workers to follow the contour of the tree, while the weighted backside added momentum for easier cutting. The goal was to create a pattern of slashes up the trunk called a cat face, without cutting too deep and killing the tree. Turpentine harvesting was a major economic force in the southeastern United States from the 1800s into the early 1900s. Workers known as hackers used tools just like this one to cut trees throughout Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas. The resin they collected was distilled into turpentine oil, used in paint, cleaning agents, medicine, and rosin, a solid byproduct still used today in violin bows and sports grips. What is the purpose of this large enclosure at O'Hare Airport? The photo was taken in September. From the no engine and no tail markings, it looks like aircraft go inside. This is O'Hare's ground run-up enclosure, also known as the Hush House. This massive, silver, three-sided structure is designed to reduce the deafening noise produced by jet engines during high-power maintenance tests. It was the first of its kind ever built at a commercial airport in the United States, opening in 1997 in response to numerous noise complaints from surrounding suburbs. Before this structure was built, planes at O'Hare had to test their engines out in the open, often in the middle of the night. These tests involved throttling engines up to 90% power, and the roar could be heard for miles. The Hush House was the city's solution, a steel-lined acoustic chamber, big enough to fit a Boeing 777, lined with special sound-absorbing panels and equipped with a curved blast deflector to redirect noise up into the sky. Studies showed it reduced noise by up to 20 decibels, turning a loud engine run-up into something more like distant traffic. In 2019, O'Hare engineers even relocated the entire Hush House to a new part of the airport by cutting it into 12 massive sections and reassembling it. I found this cylindrical container. It's about 20 inches tall, made of wood, and wrapped in painted canvas. There's a faded British Royal crest on the side, and a note inside said, "Pieces from red ammo can." What you found is a Royal Navy cordite bucket, a specialized container used to transport cordite, a type of smokeless propellant developed in the United Kingdom in the late 19th century. Cordite replaced traditional black powder and quickly became the standard propellant for everything from rifles to the massive naval guns found on battleships. To move cordite safely from the ship's magazine to the gun, sailors used these protective containers, often referred to as cordite buckets or Clarkson cases. They were designed to shield the highly flammable material during transit. These canisters were reusable, so when the cordite was used to fire the shell from a gun, the bucket would return to the magazine to pick up a new load. I found this object buried about 10 inches deep in a farmer's field in Switzerland. It's surprisingly heavy for its size and has a patina, which makes me think it could be quite old. Does anyone know what this could be? What you found is the clapper from a traditional Swiss cowbell, a bell that has been used for centuries to help herders keep track of livestock grazing in mountainous regions like the Swiss Alps. While many people associate these bells only with cows, they're actually worn by a wide range of grazing animals. In Switzerland and other regions, the bells are crafted to produce distinct tones, allowing herders to identify individual animals by sound alone. Cowbells have a history dating back over 5,000 years, with early versions found in Neolithic China. In Europe, their use became common during the Middle Ages, especially in Switzerland, Germany, and France. In Switzerland, the cowbell eventually became more than a tool. It evolved into a cultural symbol. During seasonal festivals like the Alpafzug in spring and the Alpabzug in fall, cows are paraded through villages adorned with floral headdresses and ornate bells, celebrating their migration between mountain pastures and valley farms. My grandpa gave me this, and it seems to be a piggy bank of some sort, but there's no obvious way to open it. It looks like a small chest made of metal with no visible lock. Does anyone know what it is? This item is a vintage treasure chest mystery bank, a mechanical coin bank produced in the United States during the mid-20th century. It was designed to store coins securely using a hidden release mechanism that made it difficult to open without knowing the correct steps. To open the pirate chest mystery bank, first insert a coin into the slot on top. This is an important step. It activates the internal mechanism. Next, turn the bank on its side and use a paperclip or a thin tool to press into the small hole on the bottom. This releases the locking pin. Once the pin is disengaged, the front coin slot panel can be carefully pulled forward. After removing the panel, turn the chest upside down and gently shake it to empty the coins. To close the bank, reverse the steps, slide the panel back into place, and make sure it sits flush. If a gap is visible, The locking system won't reset. Finally, turn the bank on its side and push the pin back in to lock everything in place. My dad found this strange-looking device at an estate sale and bought it for $10 without having any idea what it is. It has a cast-iron frame, a hand crank, and a small grinding wheel mounted at an angle. Does anyone know what it is? What your dad bought is a hand-cranked tool used for sharpening the blades of sickles and scythes. It was produced in the early 20th century by International Harvester under their McCormick Deering brand, which specialized in agricultural tools and machinery. The device works by rotating a small grinding wheel using the side-mounted crank. The blade is drawn across the stone at a fixed angle, allowing the user to maintain a consistent edge while sharpening. These sharpeners were valued for being portable and easy to use, making them a practical solution for keeping cutting tools sharp right in the field. I found this heavy metal piece while going through some old tools in my grandfather's workshop. It has a collet on one end and some kind of adjustable gauge on the other. Does anyone know what this could be? What you found is an indexing head from a gemstone faceting machine made by Lee Lapidaries. This tool is used in lapidary work to shape gemstones by grinding them against a flat, rotating disc called a lap. The gemstone is mounted on a metal rod, which fits into the indexing head. The head holds the stone firmly in place at a fixed angle, while the cutter presses it against the spinning lap. After polishing a facet, the lapidary manually rotates the entire head to the next position. I came across this strange dome-shaped structure in the middle of a field while browsing photos online. It looks like a giant white sombrero. Does anyone know what it is? This structure is part of a VOR station, which stands for Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range. It's a type of ground-based radio navigation system used by aircraft. Developed in the 1940s and widely adopted in the 1950s, VOR stations revolutionized air navigation by providing pilots with a reliable way to determine their position and stay on course. Each VOR station transmits a radio signal in all directions, hence the name. Aircraft equipped with VOR receivers can determine their bearing to or from the station, allowing pilots to follow precise routes, even in poor visibility or without GPS. The dome-shaped structure you saw covers the antenna array that generates these signals. This radome protects the sensitive equipment from the weather. By the late 20th century, thousands of VOR stations had been installed around the world, forming the backbone of air traffic navigation. While newer systems like GPS have taken over many of their functions, VOR stations are still widely used as a backup and remain a critical part of aviation infrastructure. We've had this wooden tool in the family for years. It was found on our old farm in Finland. It looks like a pair of tongs or pincers, but we've never known what it was actually used for. Does anyone know what it is? What you have is an old wooden divider, also known as a compass. Tools like this have a long history and were already in use by craftsmen in Europe as early as the Middle Ages. They appeared in illustrations of carpenters' toolkits from the 13th century and remained essential measuring instruments in woodworking, metalworking, and cartography for centuries. Back then, if a craftsman needed a tool like this, he made it himself. There was no standardized design. The compass, as we know it today, began to take shape in the 19th century. During the industrial era, patents for improved divider designs began to appear in both Europe and the United States. Notably, in 1850, United States patent number 7257 was granted to Lucius Chamberlain for a refined compass with a screw-tightened joint. A few years later, in 1855, George Parkhurst patented proportional dividers that could scale measurements up or down. By then, the compass had taken on the familiar form we recognize today. What is this unusual whiskey ampule? It came in a cardboard tube labeled Letzte Hilfe, which is German for last aid. It looks like some kind of gag gift, but I'm not exactly sure. Does anyone know what this is? This whiskey ampule is simply a gag gift. Such ampules were produced in Germany during the 1960s and 1970s by companies like Wolfgang Noack from Hamburg. In the United States, similar items were sold under names like Thirst Aid Kit or Desert Survival Kit, often containing miniature bottles labeled for gin, bourbon, or scotch. Today, These items are considered collectibles, usually priced between $10 and $30, depending on their rarity and condition. I found this strange metal object while cleaning the fireplace in the house we just moved into. It looks like a cast iron pan with a diamond-shaped design in the center and handles on both sides. There's also a ceramic or fire brick insert in the middle. What do you think this is? What you found is a kerosene fire starter tray. These heavy cast iron pans are designed to help start fires more efficiently in stoves or fireplaces. The ceramic or fire brick insert in the center absorbs kerosene. Once saturated, it can be lit and placed under the logs. The burning insert stays lit for 10 to 15 minutes, long enough to ignite even damp wood. This kind of device has been especially popular in colder regions like New England. Known by names like fire starter, fire lighter, or smudge pot, these tools were a common part of daily hearth life from the 1890s through the 1930s. They came in different shapes and materials, but all followed the same basic principle. While their use peaked in the early 20th century, cast iron fire starter trays with ceramic or soapstone inserts are still being manufactured and sold today. Companies like Woody's and Uniflame offer modern versions that follow the same design and purpose. I found this unusual cast iron tool while helping my uncle clean out his old workshop. It's marked Durham Specialty Company, Raleigh, North Carolina, and features 2 narrow metal discs set into a fixed frame. What do you think this tool was used for? This object is a plug tobacco cutter made by the Durham Specialty Company of Raleigh, North Carolina, around the early 1900s. It was patented in 1904 by inventor Henry Smith and was designed to cut bars of plug tobacco into smaller portions, commonly known as plugs. The cutter features a cast iron U-shaped frame with 2 circular cutting wheels mounted into each arm. When a block of dense chewing tobacco was pressed between the blades, the wheels would rotate and slice off a clean, uniform portion. At the time, plug tobacco was widely used, especially before cigarettes became dominant in the 1920s. Many cutters like this one were given away by tobacco companies as promotional items. They were often stamped with the company's name and placed right on the store counter, serving as both a tool and an advertisement. The Durham Specialty Company itself operated for only a few years, from around 1903 to shortly after 1907. I found this small silver utensil with flower-shaped decorations. When you press the button on one end, the gripping arms on the other side open up. This object is a mechanical sugar cube tong, a vintage utensil designed to pick up sugar cubes without using your fingers. These tongs operate with a simple spring and button mechanism. When you press the button on the end of the handle, the 3 prongs at the tip open like a claw. Releasing the button causes the prongs to snap shut, securely gripping whatever is inside, typically a sugar cube, but also olives or pickles. This made it both convenient and sanitary to serve sugar during tea time, especially after sugar cubes became popular in the late 19th century. This particular style became especially popular in the early 20th century, particularly in Europe and North America. In Sweden, for example, these tools were manufactured under the Triplex brand and were often stamped with a patent number. I found this strange-looking metal tool while going through my grandfather's old belongings. It's marked Peugeot Frere and has multiple slots and small circular holes on one end. This is a saw-setting tool, also known as a saw rest. It was used by woodworkers to carefully adjust the teeth of a saw blade by bending them outward in alternating directions. This process, known as setting the teeth, allowed the saw to cut a wider path than the blade itself, preventing it from binding in the wood. This particular tool, marked Peugeot, was manufactured sometime between the 1930s and 1940s by the same company that is also known for producing automobiles. The tool's flat design with multiple slots allowed it to accommodate various sawtooth sizes. A craftsman would slip the appropriate notch over each tooth and give it a twist, one by one, tooth by tooth, until the entire blade was properly set. This method has been around for centuries. Manuals from the 1680s describe nearly identical rests used by joiners in early workshops. I came across this curious wooden object that resembles a quarter-circle table. It features a spinning drum. The entire structure measures roughly 1.5 feet tall and around 3 feet long. This object is a butter worker, a specialized 19th century tool used to process butter after churning. Once cream was churned into butter, it still contained residual buttermilk, which had to be removed to prevent spoilage and improve texture. The butter worker made this step easier. It typically featured a sloped wooden surface and a roller. As the butter was pressed and rolled across the tray, the liquid would drain away, while salt could be worked in to help preserve the final product. Butter workers like this one were especially common in rural American farmhouses, particularly in German-American communities in Wisconsin. The technology continued to evolve, and in 1853, Letty Smith patented a labor-saving butter worker that introduced useful innovations such as an ice drawer to keep the butter cool and a more efficient paddle mechanism. I found this strange lamp-shaped object that looks like a small bedside lamp, but when you pull the chain, the lampshade slides down and reveals a hidden compartment inside. This item is a cigarette dispenser, cleverly disguised as a miniature lamp, most likely made around the 1950s. You would load it with cigarettes, and when a guest entered your office or living room, you'd pull the chain with a bit of flare, causing the lampshade to drop and the cigarettes to fan out from underneath. Back when smoking was a common social habit and a pack of cigarettes cost just 25 cents, it was considered good manners to offer cigarettes to visitors. Many people stored them in elegant silver boxes or whimsical dispensers like this one. With its playful and functional design, this piece likely sat on a home bar or side table, doubling as a conversation starter and a token of hospitality. I came across these unusual dome-shaped structures somewhere near Krakow. They look like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, smooth, rounded forms clustered together in a field. This complex is actually Alvernia Studios, a high-tech film studio located just west of Krakow. Built in the early 2000s by Polish media entrepreneur Stanisław Tyszynski, the studio was one of the first private film production facilities in post-communist Poland. The complex spans about 13,000 square meters and includes multiple sound stages, the world's largest spherical blue screen, music scoring studios, a motion capture lab, and facilities for color correction and final mixing. I found this carved wooden object at my friend's house. It has a diamond-shaped head and a short handle, and looks like it was made from a single piece of wood. Does anyone know what this is? What you've found is a traditional war club known as a supi, originally from Maleta Island in the Solomon Islands. One of its most recognizable features is the diamond-shaped head. These clubs were typically carved from dense tropical hardwoods such as ironwood, making them both durable and effective. While the supi was originally designed as a close combat weapon, over time it took on a deeper ceremonial role. Finely crafted versions, often featuring coconut fiber wrapped around the handle for grip, were used in rituals or as symbols of status. Some handles were inlaid with shells or decorated with intricate carvings, including stylized crocodile faces, which indicated that the weapon belonged to a tribal chief. Found this heavy metal tool at a thrift store. It has a lever mechanism, a flat base, and a vertical post with an arm that moves up and down. Any idea what it is? What you found is an early stapling device, patented in 1883 under the name machine for inserting and clinching staples. It was designed for use in bookbinding, paper assembly, or light industrial packaging. The tool worked by pressing a staple through paper or similar material and bending the legs inward to secure the sheets. The patent was later declared invalid in 1894. A federal court ruled that the design changes, such as modifying the guide slots to allow staples to be inserted in different orientations, did not constitute a true invention. Despite the patent being annulled, the Philadelphia Novelty Manufacturing Company, which originally held the rights, continued to successfully produce and sell the staplers. Found this on my boyfriend's desk. It's a small metal bar, about 2 inches long, with decorative ends and no obvious function. He said his mom just handed it to him one day, but neither of us knows what it's for. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a collar bar, a classic men's fashion accessory that connects the two sides of a dress shirt collar. It's typically worn with a tie and serves both a functional and decorative purpose. The bar holds the collar points in place and lifts the tie knot slightly, creating a clean, elevated look. Collar bars became especially popular in the 1920s and 1930s and have remained a subtle symbol of sharp, traditional style ever since. They come in different forms. Some are straight pins, others have screws or clips at the ends. I came across this ornate silver item marked Mappin Brothers. It features a decorative clasp with several chains hanging from it. The design appears Victorian. This item is a sterling silver chatelaine made by the British silversmiths Mappin Brothers sometime in the late 19th century. A chatelaine was a decorative clasp worn at the waist from which several chains hung, each holding a small household item such as scissors, sewing needles, a thimble, a vinaigrette, a pencil, or a watch. Mappin Brothers was a well-known silversmith firm based in London and Sheffield. It was active throughout the 19th century and later merged into Mappin and Webb in the early 1900s. Its silverwork was widely recognized for its quality and craftsmanship, and its chatelaines were often ornate. I found this decorative-looking sphere, and I'm not sure what it is. It's covered in engraved lines and markings. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a celestial globe, a model of the sky that shows the positions of stars and constellations as they appear from Earth. Unlike a regular globe that represents the surface of our planet, a celestial globe maps the night sky onto a sphere. Its surface is marked with stars, constellation figures, and coordinate lines such as the celestial equator and the ecliptic. Celestial globes have existed for many centuries and were used in both astronomy and education. The earliest known examples date back to ancient Greece, but they became especially widespread in Europe during the Renaissance. At that time, many of them featured detailed engravings and were mounted on rotating stands. They were valued not only as scientific instruments, but also as works of art. Spotted this odd-looking object at my local symphony. It was sitting on the floor near the brass section and went untouched for most of that performance. It's cone-shaped, pretty large, and looks like it might fit inside a brass instrument. Any idea what this is? What you saw is a tuba mute, a cone-shaped device used to alter the sound of a tuba. Just like mutes for trumpets or trombones, a tuba mute fits into the bell of the instrument and changes its tone. Depending on the material, usually aluminum, fiber, or wood, the mute can soften the sound, make it more nasal or focused, or give it a unique timbre required by the music. Tuba mutes are most often used in orchestral music, especially in modern and contemporary compositions where composers ask for subtle changes in tone or texture. Because of their size, they can be bulky and awkward to move during a performance, so players often place them nearby and only use them for specific passages. My cousin got this odd-looking item at an estate sale in Michigan. It's small, made of wood, with two curved metal arms and an old leather strap. We're not sure what it was used for. Does anyone know what this is? What your cousin bought is a vintage tabletop match holder. These items were often handmade or produced in small batches. The curved metal arms on top were meant to hold a rough surface stone that could be used to strike matches. Found this at a thrift store. It's a small metal container with a handle and a hinged lid, made of aluminum with floral patterns stamped into the surface. Any idea what this is? What you found is called a silent butler, a small lidded pan traditionally used to collect crumbs, ashes, or small bits of trash from tables and other surfaces. Silent butlers became especially popular in the United States during the mid-20th century and were often made from aluminum, brass, or silver plate. This one appears to be from Everlast Metal Products, a California-based company known for its aluminum kitchenware and decorative embossed patterns. These items were often given as housewarming or wedding gifts. I found this mysterious object in my history classroom. My teacher isn't sure what it is either. It's made of carved wood in the center and appears to have a metal rim. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a hand-carved prosphora bread seal used in Eastern Orthodox and Eastern Catholic churches to prepare sacred bread for the Eucharist. These seals are pressed into the top of unbaked loaves to imprint religious symbols, most commonly a cross with Greek letters. The markings guide priests during the liturgy, showing exactly where to cut the bread during the service. Bread seals like this have been used for over 1,000 years. The practice began in the early Christian era and was heavily influenced by Roman baking customs, where loaves were stamped with identifying marks. By the Byzantine period, detailed seals were being used across the Christian world, from Greece to Egypt and Russia. Today, prosphora seals are still in active use all over the world, and artisans continue to carve them by hand. I found this small brass mask pendant at a thrift store. It appears to be handmade, with spring-like pieces soldered behind the eyes and beaded extensions on the sides. What you found is a miniature Chokwe mask pendant, a traditional ornament linked to the Chokwe people of Central Africa, particularly in Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. These pendants are modeled after full-sized ceremonial masks, most commonly the Mwana mask, which represents an idealized female ancestor. The detailed facial features, including almond-shaped eyes, a narrow nose, and an open mouth with carved teeth, reflect traditional concepts of beauty among the Chokwe. The cross-shaped motif on the forehead is also significant. Known as Singil Engelia, it's a traditional scarification pattern with historical roots that trace back to Portuguese influence in the region during the 17th century. Over time, the Chokwe adopted the symbol as a decorative mark of prestige and protection, incorporating it into their masks and even personal tattoos. These pendants weren't just jewelry. They often served as amulets, believed to carry protective spiritual power. I found these two carved seals in a box of art supplies. One has a square base and the other is round, each leaving a unique stamp when pressed on paper. What you found are traditional East Asian name seals, personalized stamps used in countries like China and Japan in place of handwritten signatures. These seals carry a person's name carved in stylized characters and are used to authenticate documents or artwork. The square and round shapes you see are common formats. In China, seals are often square, while in Japan, personal seals, known as hanko or inkan, are usually round. They're dipped in a thick red ink paste and pressed onto paper to leave a clear, consistent imprint. Name seals have been used for over 2,000 years, originating in Imperial China and later adopted by Japan and Korea. I found this old metal tool while cleaning out my grandfather's shed. It has a serrated clamp and a pointed spike at the end. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Kragg's combination jar opener, a cleverly engineered kitchen tool from the 1930s. Invented by Franz Krag and manufactured by his company in Chicago, this compact device was designed to open screw-top jars, pop bottle caps, and pierce tin cans. Its adjustable jaws lock around a jar lid using a lever mechanism that delivers a firm grip and added torque, making it much easier to twist off tight lids. The pointed spike at the end was used to puncture cans, while a small hooked flange built into the frame served as a bottle opener. These tools were marketed during the Great Depression as affordable, space-saving solutions for the everyday kitchen. My dad has had this strange metal item on his keyring for years, but he's never known what it's actually used for. It's about 3 inches long and made of solid metal. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a vintage bicycle gear shift lever. These small levers were commonly mounted on older multi-speed bicycles and were used to manually change gears by pulling or releasing a cable connected to the drivetrain. The rider would move the lever forward or back to shift the chain between different sprockets, making it easier or harder to pedal depending on the terrain. Levers like this were widely used from the 1930s through the 1980s, especially during the 10-speed boom of the 1970s. They required a bit of skill to operate since they didn't have indexed clicks like modern shifters. Instead, riders learned to shift by feel and sound, adjusting the lever just enough for the chain to catch the next gear. I was walking past a building when this thing suddenly dropped and hit the ground just a few feet behind me. It looks heavy with metal fins and some wiring inside. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a motor rotor. It's the part that turns inside the motor to convert electrical energy into mechanical motion. This particular rotor was most likely removed from a medium-sized industrial motor, possibly from a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning fan. Rotors like this have a long history. The principle behind them dates back to the early 1800s, but the breakthrough came in 1888, when Nikola Tesla patented the alternating current induction motor, a design that eliminated brushes and commutators and made possible more efficient and durable motors. His invention changed the course of industrial development and is still the foundation for most motors used today. I saw this strange squash racket at a thrift store. It's made of wood and has a weird wooden frame or clamp around the head. What is this thing? This is a wooden racket press, a clamping device that was once essential for players using wooden squash, tennis, or badminton rackets. These presses became common in the late 19th century, around the time lawn tennis began gaining popularity. Players quickly discovered that wooden rackets could twist or bend if not properly stored, so manufacturers developed presses to hold the racket's head in a flat, stable position. By the early 1900s, companies like Spalding, Wright, and Ditson and Dunlop were producing versions for both casual players and professionals. The design was simple but effective. You'd place the racket head between two wooden boards and tighten screws at the corners. This kept the frame flat and protected. One notable 1930 patent by Spencer Flower introduced a lighter frame design that became especially popular on both sides of the Atlantic. I saw this Hummer on the highway in Georgia. What caught my eye was the strange metal object mounted on the roof. It's clearly bolted on, not just strapped down. Does anyone know what this is? What you're looking at is a telescopic antenna mast, a specialized communications device that extends vertically to raise antennas, cameras, or sensors high above a vehicle. These masts have been used since the mid-20th century in everything from TV news vans to emergency command vehicles, military communications trucks, and even amateur radio setups. The goal is to get a signal source or receiver up high to improve line of sight and range. They can operate pneumatically, using air pressure to lift each section, or mechanically with winches or manual clamps. I found this unusual wooden rack in the basement of my 1901 home. The top and base are held with small screws, while the rest is joined with dovetails. Any idea what it is? What you found is a vintage wooden magazine or newspaper rack. The style resembles what was historically known as a Canterbury, a low-standing rack originally designed in 18th century England to hold sheet music, and later adapted for books and magazines. The multiple wooden dowels were meant for draping or stacking reading materials without creasing them, and the flat top could even serve as a small side table. I spotted a man at the airport carrying this strange, dome-shaped case. It looks unusually bulky and has a unique shape. Does anyone know what this case is for? This is a cowboy hat travel case, often called a Western hat can. It's shaped to fit the tall crown and wide brim of a Western-style hat, protecting it from being crushed, bent, or damaged during transit. These cases have been around since the mid-20th century and are a common sight in rodeo and ranching communities. Inside, the hat is suspended on internal supports, and some models include brackets, ventilation slots, or compartments for small accessories. High-end cowboy hats can be quite expensive, sometimes costing several $100s or more. I saw this street performer playing a strange metallic instrument that looks like an upside-down steel drum. He was tapping it with his hands, and it made these soft, melodic tones. What is this instrument called? What you saw is called a hang, a unique hand-played percussion instrument invented in Switzerland in the year 2000. It's shaped like a flying saucer and made from specially treated steel, with a central dome and several tone fields arranged around it. The musician gently taps these tone fields with their hands to produce rich, melodic notes that blend rhythm and harmony. Despite often being called a hang drum, the creators prefer simply hang, which means hand in the Bernese German dialect. The hang was developed by Felix Rohner and Sabine Scharer of Panart Hangbauerg, who had previously worked on Caribbean-style steel drums. Only a few thousand original hang instruments were ever made between 2001 and 2013. Panart eventually stopped producing them, but the design inspired an entire family of similar instruments, now known as handpans. I saw this large white attachment labeled Airhead mounted on the passenger side window of an old Volkswagen wagon. It looks like a barrel with a mesh opening facing forward, almost like a jet intake. Is it some kind of air filter? What you've found is a vintage automotive swamp cooler, a simple, low-tech air conditioner that was popular in the United States before built-in air conditioning systems became standard. It mounts to the passenger side window and uses nothing but airflow and water to cool the car's interior. As the car moves, hot outside air is forced into the front of the unit, where it passes over a water-soaked lining. That evaporation cools the air, and the now moist, cooler air is channeled directly into the cabin. These devices were especially popular from the 1930s through the 1950s, particularly in hot, dry climates like the American Southwest. They didn't require electricity, refrigerants, or any mechanical parts, just a full water tank and a bit of forward motion. Brands like Thermador, Allstate, and Firestone sold thousands of them, and they were a familiar sight on desert highways. In the last video, I asked you to guess what this unusual kitchen tool might be used for. Everyone had great guesses, and many of you got it right. This item is a watermelon cuber cutter. It's designed to easily slice watermelon into neat, even cubes. Thank you to everyone who participated and shared your guesses. A special shout out to Donna M. Schmid for being the first to correctly identify it. All right, it's time for another mystery item. Take a look at this strange wooden kitchen tool. What do you think it is used for? Leave your guesses in the comments, and I'll reveal the answer in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Your support motivates me to create more videos. See you next time.